For these problems, we're going to be factoring these two different polynomials. The first one will be a bit easier to go through, and the second one is more of a example that shows all the possible things that could come up when factoring. Okay, so to start off this first problem, I'm going to approach this with two different methods. The first method is most often referred to as the guess and check method, and it is more than likely the most common type of factoring that there is. And what it says is you want to take two sets of parentheses and you want to check what two values are multiplied together to give you your first term. So what do you multiply together to get x squared? Well, generally you're going to multiply together x and x. From there, you want to check this symbol. So this one right here, whether it's positive or negative. If that symbol's positive, then whatever symbol is in the middle will go with each of your x's. So for instance, if this were a +6, then we would look at the symbol here and we'd put a minus after each of our x's. But in this example, it was a -6. When this is a minus, you will automatically put a plus and then a minus, or a minus and then a plus, basically different signs. At this point, we now look at the last number, the 6. We want two numbers that multiply to give us 6, but then add together to give us this -1 here. Remember, whenever there isn't a number in front of your variable, it means there's technically a 1. So in this case, we need two numbers that multiply to give us this 6 and add together to give us this -1. So if you think this through, you can either multiply 1 and 6 together to get 6, or you can multiply 2 and 3. Those are the only possible combinations of numbers that multiply to give you 6. So adding these together, we need a result of -1, and the only way for that to happen is if this 3 were negative, meaning 2 plus -3, which means this plus is going to be matched with this 2. So the 2 goes here, and then this minus will be matched with this negative that we just had with the 3, so we have a -3. So x plus 2 times x minus 3 is the factored form of x squared minus x minus 6. If you were to multiply this out, you would get back to the x squared minus x minus 6, and that's always a way to check your work. Now for the middle out method. This is a less common way to factor, but it reduces any type of guessing. So we're going to go back through most of the same process, just in a different way, basically writing down everything we see. So for instance, this 6, this step where we wanted to find everything that multiplies to give us that 6. We're going to be writing all of those out. So let's start back at the beginning. X squared minus x minus 6. The first thing that you do with the middle out method, or what is sometimes referred to as the AC method, is take your first term and your last term and multiply them together. So 6 times x squared is 6x squared. Once you do this, you want to write out all of your double multiples that will multiply to give you this 6x squared. So for instance, we could have 1x, or just x, and 6x. Likewise, we could have 2x and 3x. 3x and 2x. I know this seems like the same multiple, but order will end up mattering in this process. And then finally, 6x and 1x. Once we have this, we will look at this symbol that's attached to our last term. Since it's a negative, that tells us that we are going to be subtracting every one of these combinations. And when we subtract them, we want to find which of these four combinations gives us a result that is our middle term, this negative x. So if we start with our first combination, 1x minus 6x is negative 5x. Then 2x minus 3x is negative x. And that is exactly what we needed. We needed to get that negative x. So the reason it's called the middle out method is because we're going to take this middle term and replace it. We're going to take it out. And we're going to replace it with what we just found here. Negative x is the same thing as 2x minus 3x. So once we know that, we can take this value and plug it into the original problem. So instead of x squared minus x minus 6, we have x squared plus 2x, because that's a positive 2x, minus 3x minus 6. And now from here, this is now a factor by grouping problem. We're going to group our two pairs of terms together. And always remember, you do not leave the negative on the outside of the parentheses. You always put a plus on the outside. And now this allows us to factor. So we want to factor out whatever's common between the first two terms. There's an x in common, which gives us x times the quantity of x squared divided by x is x, plus 2x divided by x is 2, plus, from our plus up here, and now we again want to factor out what's ever common between these two terms. And there is a negative 3 that can be divided evenly into each of these terms, so we'll get a plus negative 3 times negative 3x divided by negative 3 is x, and negative 6 divided by negative 3 is plus 2. And at this point, we now have a common term in parentheses. X plus 2 is common, so we bring one of them down. And then on the outside, we combine the terms that were being added together. X plus negative 3 or x minus 3. And now this is completely factored. And this brings us back to exactly where we were when we did the guess and check method. Remember, whenever you're doing these methods, generally you want to go for guess and check first, as it saves a lot of time. But middle out method, although it is a lot of work, is generally what you want to use when you deal with much harder problems like the one that I will approach in the next video here.